Today I'm going to talk about what to expect during the contract process of buying or selling a home. I'm going to talk fast because there's a lot of material to cover and I don't want this to be a long video. This is not intended as legal advice. Please do hire an attorney to answer legal questions as you proceed through this process. This is just a high-level perspective of what to expect during the contract process without me going into great detail. First of all, there are a few notices a seller is required to provide the buyer prior to execution of a contract. If there's a public improvement district, a statutory tax district, a propane gas service area, or if the property is located in a certified service area of a utility service provider. A title agent and/or a property manager can usually help produce the information for the seller if help is needed. Next, the effective date of the contract is the final date of acceptance, where the contract becomes binding. So both the buyer and the seller have agreed to all the terms and both have signed and initialed any changes to the contract. The last party to accept must communicate acceptance back to the other party or their agent so that each party knows when the contract performance requirements begin. In terms of calculating dates on the contract, consider the effective date to be day 0. Next, the contract is delivered to the title company, who must deliver the title commitment to the buyer within 20 days of receiving a copy of the contract. So this includes copies of restrictive covenants and, of course, documents evidencing exceptions in the commitment other than the standard printed exceptions. Once the buyer receives the title commitment, they usually have about 3 to 10 days to issue any title objections, such as defects, exceptions, or encumbrances to the title. The amount of time allowed is negotiable, and I recommend that buyers absolutely have an attorney review the documents and advise whether they should issue any title objections. Next, the survey, T47 affidavit, and seller's disclosure should be provided by the seller to the buyer, usually within a few days of the effective date of the contract, but that time frame is negotiable. The termination option fee is due within 3 days. The termination option is usually 7 to 10 days long, but the time frame is negotiable. This is the period of time where the buyer can terminate for any reason, and this is also the time when the buyer normally conducts their inspections and negotiates repairs if any are warranted. Notice of termination must be given by 5 p.m. on the date of expiration, so be sure to make note of that. The earnest money is due to the title company within 3 days unless the last day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. And in that case, the time is extended until the end of the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. If there's a homeowners association, the HOA documents are due from the seller to the buyer usually within 10 to 15 days, whatever's negotiated in the contract. This usually includes the restrictions, bylaws, rules and regulations, and resale certificate from a property owners association. The buyer may terminate the contract within 3 days after the buyer receives the subdivision information or prior to closing, whichever occurs first, and get their earnest money back. If the buyer is financing the purchase of the property, there's likely a financing addendum. This usually expires within 15 to 20 days, but the time frame is negotiable. This gives the buyer time to secure buyer approval, which is deemed to be obtained when the terms of the loan are available and the buyer has satisfied the lender requirements relating to buyer's assets, income, and credit history. Buyer approval is not to be mistaken for loan approval, which can sometimes take all the way up to the closing date to be secured. On another note, if your purchase or sale contract has an addendum for sale of other property by buyer form, then the buyer has a property to sell and needs the proceeds to complete your purchase or sale. This will often expire close to the closing date of your contract, but the time frame is negotiable. Finally, you have a closing date, which is negotiable, often 30 to 40 days from the effective date of the initial contract. If there's a seller leaseback of the property, the first day of rent would be the day following the close date. The promulgated leaseback addendum is set up for the seller to pay the buyer a deposit and the rent for the entire leaseback period at closing. The seller needs to remember to get their deposit back upon the expiration of the leaseback, of course. Sellers, please remember to leave your home clean and move-in ready as a courtesy for the buyers. Buyers and sellers, be sure to read page 1 of your contract to understand what improvements and accessories stay with the sale and what go. For example, curtains and rods stay, TVs go, but TV mounts stay per the contract unless negotiated otherwise. The seller should leave utilities active the entire term of the contract. So I hope this provides a good summary of what to expect during the contract period. I want to offer my best wishes for a successful sale.